Good morning. It's still morning, which is good. For those of you confused, who may be confused, I am not Andy Pulane. Okay. That was yesterday. He has a better accent than I do. Let me tell you a story. In the summer of 1995, I graduated from university, from undergraduate school. And I graduated on Saturday. And on Monday, the Monday right after that Saturday, I joined the circus. That was my first job. Immediately. This was the circus, right here. These are my photos from 1995. I took them on a disposable camera. I spent 6 months on this, with the circus. We traveled up and down the east coast of the United States. We worked 2 shows a day, every day, with 3 shows on Saturdays. So every week, I saw the same circus show 15 times in a row. Needless to say, my children will never go to the circus, at least not with me, because we've seen it enough times. Now, the interesting thing is that you meet a lot of interesting people over time. Actually, really quick, before I tell you that part of the story, I was driving home. I live outside of New York City, and I was driving home from the city with my children, and I was passing it, and there it was, 20 years later. I hadn't been there since 1995, and it was set up just not too far from my house again. And so I stopped in to see if I recognized anybody, but I didn't. But what was interesting is during my travels with the circus, a lot of interesting people come across your path because it's the circus. It's a strange place. One of the interesting people that I met during that time was Steven Tyler. He's the lead singer for Aerosmith. And in case you're wondering, that's Steven Tyler, and that's me, right next to him. It's been 20 years. It's a long time. Steven Tyler has done a good job of preserving himself in the last 20 years. Another interesting person that I met that summer was this guy. This is the human cannonball. Okay. If you can't see him in the photo, that's him right there, being loaded into the cannon. Now, the circus, I told you we worked every day, and really, but it was only 2 hours per show, so we had about 20 hours of free time every day, and you start to have a conversation with people, especially interesting people like the human cannonball. And the question that immediately comes up is, how do you become the human cannonball? Right? What is the resume, the career path for becoming the human cannonball? And so I asked him, and he told me the story of how he became the human cannonball. And I'm going to share that story with you now. And as these stories have a way of doing, this story starts with the previous human cannonball. So you have to kind of hand these things down. So the way this works, there's a truck, there's a big red truck, and it has a cannon on it. Now the cannon has a spring in it. It's not a real cannon, right? The spring, the human cannonball, they pull the string back, the spring back, the human cannonball slides down. The ringmaster pushes a button, there's a little puff of smoke, and he gets shot out of the cannon. Now, the way it works is when he lands, at the other end, they land in a net. That's it. The previous human cannonball, the way that his team worked every day was that the circus would come to town, they would put the tent up, and they would drive the truck into the tent, they would aim the cannon, and then they would put a dummy, a doll, a mannequin into the cannon that weighed the same as the human cannonball. And they would fire it. And wherever that doll landed at the other end of the stage, that's where they put up the net. And this worked every night, day after day, city after city, town after town, until one night. The circus was running late, and they got to the next town late. They put the tent up, but they didn't have time to test the doll to see where it would land. And so they left it outside overnight, and it rained that night. The next day, they did the same thing they'd done every day before. They took the wet mannequin, the doll, they put it into the cannon, and they fired it. And they saw where it landed, and that's where they put up the net. That afternoon, in front of 4,000 children, the previous human cannonball got into the cannon, waved goodbye to 4,000 children, and they fired him out. Now, of course, he weighed significantly less, and so he sails way past the net. in front of all these children. Now, he doesn't die, so that's good, but he does get injured pretty critically. And so he goes home to Florida, which is where all circuses come from. I'm not sure if you knew that, but all circuses come from Florida. And he sees his pool boy, the guy who cleans his pool, and he says, would you like a promotion, essentially, from pool boy to human cannonball, and that's how this guy got the job, right? So that's how he gets the job. So why am I telling you this story? Other than it's a very interesting story and kind of funny, why am I telling you this story? The reason is this. The previous human cannonball and his team made the same assumptions every day, that everything would be the same, and they did their job exactly the same way every day. Until one day, those assumptions weren't true anymore, and their work met with tragic consequences. And the same holds true for us. The assumptions that we have been building products on, digital products, and designing digital products on, don't work in today's realities. The world that we live in has fundamentally changed, especially in the last 5 years. Back in 2011, Mark Andreessen famously said, "Software is eating the world." And what he meant by that is that every business of scale, or every business that seeks to scale in the 21st century, is a software business at its core. And you have to start treating your company, your work, your projects, and your products as software-based products if you want to succeed and grow in the 21st century. The most obvious and glaring example of this recently, at least in the United States, was the New York Times. There was a leaked report that came out of an internal audit that the New York Times did to try to understand why they were losing the digital game to BuzzFeed and The Verge and Vox and all of these digitally native media sites. And the big takeaway from this report was that the New York Times it's a 150-year-old institution. They saw themselves as a journalistic institution that happened to distribute content through a digital channel, among many other channels. And what the report recommended was to flip that on its head. And they have to start thinking of themselves as a digital company, as a software-based business that happens to do really great software engineering. And that fundamentally changes the way that you manage your teams, the way that you build the company, and the way that you build products. And you see this theme over and over and over again in business. This is from Federal Express. This is the senior VP of IT for that company. He says, "I run a software company inside of Federal Express." You don't think of Federal Express as a software company, right? You think of them as logistics and delivery. But they are a software company, right? And as the digital transformation takes hold, there are many companies that push back and don't believe that this is actually going to change the way that we do business. 12 years ago, Napster came out. And everybody said, no way. There's no way we're going to change the way that we distribute, make, and consume music, right? We tried to sue them out of existence. This is the Recording Industry Association of America. They waged a legal battle against Napster to shut them down. This is Lars Ulrich from Metallica, right? He was very upset at Napster, very, very publicly, right? 12 years later, guess what, right? Software is eating the world. The same holds true for cars. Tesla, a fascinating company to take a look at. They are, in the United States, they are changing the way that people buy, service, and maintain their cars. And what's happening is that the old companies, the auto dealership industry, is suing them to try to get them to stop doing the things that they do with technology because it's disrupting their business. Right? And inevitably, this is the future model. The same holds true for Netflix. When Netflix came out, no one had any belief that we would consume, deliver, create movies and videos this way. Right? And today, again, in the United States, I challenge you to find one of these stores still in business. Right? The video rental store doesn't exist anymore. Now look, this is the way that we used to make products. Right? We've made products this way for 100 years. And this makes sense when you know exactly what it is you're making, what it is you're manufacturing, what it's going to look like, and how people are going to use it. So if you're making a car, this makes sense. And what we've done is we've taken this model and we've applied it to software, making the assumption that this model holds true for software, that people can we can work an assembly line to create software. But in reality, software is different. And the reason software is different today, because it's eating the world, is this. Software has become continuous. There is no end state to a digital product. We just keep iterating, optimizing, improving, making it better, making it more relevant, and more successful. We don't know what the end state is going to look like. We don't know how customers will use it. We don't know what the best designs are up front. So we have to change the way that we build products. Let me put a really fine point on this, okay? This is how often Amazon pushes code to production. I'm going to take a drink and let you think about that for a second. This is how often someone, somewhere, sees new bits, some Amazon customer. What this means is that every 11.6 seconds, Amazon gets to have a conversation with their audience. 5 times a minute, they get to have a conversation with their audience. Does this work? Does this not work? And what they're creating is a sensing layer. It's the opportunity and the ability to have all of these feelers out to the market to understand whether this is a good idea or whether this is a good idea or not. And then equally as quickly, they can respond to that. They sense and they can respond. This was a bad idea. Let's roll it back. Right? This was a good idea. Let's do more of it. That's the nature of continuous software. Now, as you do that, as you're sensing and responding, you're collecting insight. There's a tremendous amount of inbound information that comes from that. And that insight has 2 sides to it. Right? It has a quantitative side, what people are doing. Are they clicking? Are they buying? Are they telling their friends? And there's a qualitative side. Why are they not buying? Why are they not telling their friends? Why are they clicking? Right? We have to understand both sides to get that holistic view of how to take the next step forward, right? How to run that next 11.6 second experiment. Now, here's the interesting part. 12 years ago, I worked here at America Online, okay? And this is how we shipped software, on these things. We would work for 6 months to make sure everything was perfect, right? Because then you make a thing called the gold master, the GM release, if you've ever heard that term. That's the disk that all the other disks are copied from. So it had to be perfect because we're going to make 20 million copies of it. And then we're going to ship it all over the United States and all over the world. And then we would collect feedback and information for another 6 months, and then work for another 6 months, and then ship the disk again with updates. Right? That was a 12-month feedback loop. 12 months before we could make updates, because this is how we were shipping software. And so in those situations, you could manage things in a very serial fashion, in that assembly line fashion. But in a continuous world, managing for an assembly line and managing in this serial fashion doesn't work anymore because the feedback comes in too quickly. And we have the opportunity to react much more quickly. And so as makers of software, as makers of digital companies, of digital products, we have some questions to ask ourselves. The first is this: what does a continuous world mean to the way that we design products and organizations? Right? That's the first. Second, how can we take advantage of all of this new information? If you start to have this sense and respond conversation with your audience, you're going to get a lot of new information. How do we take advantage of that? And then finally, how can we maximize the creativity, the learning, and the productivity of our teams so that we can take that information and build the best possible products that we can? Well, in order to do this, in order to survive in this new continuous world, we have to build a culture of learning. Okay? We have to value learning. Every 11.6 seconds, that's an experiment. You learn something, and then you take the next step forward. A couple years ago, my friend Dave Gray published a book called The Connected Company. In The Connected Company, he talks about two types of product strategy. The first kind of strategy is called deliberate strategy. That is when the chief executives of the company decide what the company is going to build, and they tell that to the teams, and the teams go and build those ideas. And that's how things used to work, again, when we knew what the end state was going to be. But what happens when you use deliberate strategy is illustrated really well by this video clip I'm going to show you from the movie Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. This is Johnny Depp. Why would anyone ever want that? The worst possible thing that you can hear when you've finished building your product. That's what happens these days with deliberate strategy. We make a series of assumptions, and then we give it to customers, and they say, well, why would anyone ever want that? Right? The second worst thing you can do is exactly what he does in there, is to fall back on the marketing notes that then justify the decisions that you made that went into that product. It'll be the end of all cooking in all kitchens, right? Assuming that no one likes to cook and no one likes to spend time in their kitchens. So let's get rid of that. Right? And again, with these, when you work in this deliberate way, you assume that you know what the end state is. And the reality is, we have no idea what the end state is. Could be at the beginning of a project, right? No idea. The opposite of deliberate strategy is emergent strategy. Emergent strategy is organic. It starts at the bottom and it works its way up. We figure out how to solve a particular problem, and then we use that as it emerges based on customer feedback. Right? We sense and respond how customers react to our ideas, and then we build product strategies that arise from that. Now the trick, of course, is to do this, is to build these experiments and this learning while maintaining our current work. Right? We have to build that experimentation with enough slack in the system so that we can keep producing product and learning at the same time. And we see this over and over and over again. This is Jeff Bezos from Amazon, where he says you need to set up and organize so that you can do as many experiments per unit of time as possible. You hear this from Eric Schmidt from Google, you hear this from Jack Welch at GE, and so forth. It's about taking as many attempts at a problem as you can. So the question is then, if we've got all this new information, if we're building continuous products, how do we take advantage of it? At the core of a culture of innovation and at the core of a culture of learning is the team. The team is the atomic unit of a culture of learning. And I want to talk about what makes up an innovative team. There are three things I want to talk about specifically. The first is the anatomy of the team. What is the makeup of the team? Who should be on it? The second is how do we task the team? How do we tell them what to do? And the third is how should the team work? Is there a specific process they should use or a methodology? So let's go through each one of these. Let's start with the anatomy of a team. Beef. It's what's for dinner in Argentina. That's for sure. What is the makeup of the team? I'm going to start each one of these sections with a series of anti-patterns. Anti-patterns are the opposite of what you should actually be doing. Right? So let's start with how not to build innovative teams. First and foremost, silos. Discipline-specific silos. Designers over here, product managers over here, engineers over here, marketing in a different building or in a different country. Right? Siloed teams don't communicate well. When they don't communicate well, they rely on written documentation. Written documentation takes time to create, to consume, to react to. That's efficiency that gets taken out of the software, the product creation process. And if you've got new information coming in very quickly, you're not reacting fast enough. Siloed teams feel like service providers. They feel like they're part of that assembly line. I just do what I'm told and I move it on to the next person down the line for me. I don't feel like I'm part of the whole, and I have no sense of really what we're building or how it fits into the company's product strategy or how it fits into the overall mission of the company. And then the worst thing that possibly happens in these is the lack of collaboration. Teams don't work together. They don't spend time bouncing ideas off of each other and learning from each other. Now look, I'm guilty of doing this myself. A few years ago, I was tasked with building a design team at a company called The Ladders. And I came in, and the first thing that I did was I built a design team silo right in the middle over there. And heading up that silo was me, right? Coming in. And every time somebody needed something from the team, they came to me. And they would say, listen, we need some work done. And I said, terrific, Jennifer has some bandwidth. Give it to Jennifer. And they come again, they say, we need some more work. I said, terrific, Jennifer's got some more bandwidth. Let's give it to her. And they said, we need some more work. And I said, Jennifer has a little bit more bandwidth. Right? Now Jennifer's supporting 3 projects. She's doing as little work as she can on each one to make sure that she keeps the other ones running. And she comes in every day deciding which 2 people she's going to piss off today. Right? Because she's got to pick a priority. Right? This siloed model forces people to prioritize and to do as little work as possible before they can move on to the next project, and they don't build that camaraderie with the team itself. And so the question becomes, what team structure facilitates a culture of innovation and a culture of learning? And there's 4 qualities to that. The first is this: small. Keep your team small. 6 to 8 people, what Jeff Bezos likes to call a 2-pizza team. 2 American pizzas. I've seen the pizzas here. Some are small, some are big. Big American pizzas, right? If you can't feed your team with 2 pizzas, it's too big, right? Small teams are easy to manage. You know what everybody does. And if someone's not doing their job, you can hold them accountable because there's nowhere to hide. Okay? They can move quickly. Second, co-located. Make sure that your small team is sitting together in the same space, not in different offices, not in different countries, hopefully, as close to each other as possible. Now, I understand that reality for many of us is distributed teams. And if that's the case, at the very least, you have to be awake at the same time. Okay? You can't do real-time collaboration if people are not awake at the same time. Small, co-located. The third is dedicated. They're working on one project. Okay? This project, one team on the same project. If you take a small team that's working on one project, and then you take 1 or 2 of those people and have them work on something else for a little while, you've got 4 people over here waiting for them to come back and do their job. And so now you're hurting 2 separate teams. Small, co-located, dedicated, and finally self-sufficient. The team can do everything that it needs to do. If the team needs to design, there's a designer. If the team needs to write code, someone can write code. If you need to deploy, there's a DevOps person. Whatever it takes, the team can do it. It doesn't mean that you need representatives from each one of those departments. You just need people with those competencies on the team itself. Those are the qualities of the team: small, co-located, dedicated, self-sufficient. The next thing I want to talk about is, how do you tell the team what to do? How do you task the team? Look, this is a good model, right? I've worked for companies that have worked like this, where you just yell at the team for a while until they actually start doing something. But there are other ways. But let's talk about anti-patterns. First of all, how to not get teams to do the right thing. My favorite anti-pattern in telling people how not to do things is the roadmap. Right? The product roadmap. Right? These are terrific artifacts. Right? We're here, and we're going there. And there are 5 steps in between here and there. Right? They tell a compelling story, they show progress, and people like to hold on to these things as the single source of truth for how this project is going to end up. Right? In reality, this is what roadmaps look like. Right? Things happen, things change. Something we thought was easy is now complex. Right? Something that we thought we were doing well, the competition just released, and they did a better job than us. Right? Maybe the economics of your marketplace have completely changed in the time it took you to build this feature. Right? I worked at the Ladders in 2008. In October of 2008 is when I started. We had a 9-month roadmap. We found jobs for people who made $100,000 or more. That was the nature of the service. In October of 2008, the US economy melted down. We had a balanced ecosystem until that happened, of job seekers and jobs. And after the meltdown, lots of job seekers, no jobs. But we had a 9-month roadmap. Right? What do? You heads down, just keep working? Or do you have to pause and change direction and work this way? Here's the way some other companies do it. This is how Gilt Group in New York City does this. They don't maintain a roadmap document. Instead, they have a set of active initiatives. Those are company priorities, things we'd like to achieve as a company. And every now and again, we check whether the priorities for those initiatives are accurate. And if not, we reassess. We work towards business outcomes. Right? A couple years ago, Kent Beck, one of the authors of the Agile Manifesto, wrote this. He said, product roadmaps should be lists of questions, not lists of features. And essentially, a roadmap says, we will build X, we will build Y, we will build Z. What he's saying is, let's ask the question, should we build X? Should we build Y? Should we build Z? Is it even worth it to us to figure out how to design and build this so that it makes sense? Because when you have roadmaps that have nothing but features on them, what we end up doing is incentivizing our teams to produce output. This is the Microsoft Word version of a guitar. Okay? 95% of this guitar is useless to 95% of the people who would ever pick it up. Right? We need this piece. Right? Essentially, that makes sense. The rest of this is for Pat Metheny. This guitar was made for him. And he's essentially the only person who can play it. Right? But this is what happens to our products when we have feature roadmaps. The incentive is to launch features, so we launch features, and our products end up looking like this. Useless, mostly useless to most of the people who use it. Right? At the end of the day, shipping a product on its own is not a measure of success. Okay? Anybody remember Google Wave? Right. We shipped it, so what? Right? Because we keep pushing these features and we keep building bloat into our products. Let's focus on the things that people actually need our products to do. Right? What are the things that people actually need our products to do? In reality, we need remote controls to turn the TV on, change the channel, and change the volume. Right? I don't know what the other buttons do on that, and neither does this guy's grandmother. Right? Now look, most companies manage to output. They manage to features, and the reason they do this is because it's easy. It's binary. Did you ship the feature? Yes, we did. Right? We made the thing. Here it is. Terrific. You get to work, keep your job or work again. Instead, we should be tasking teams to achieve business outcomes, right? To move the needle on something that matters to us as a company by giving them problems to solve, not solutions to implement, right? Get people to successfully sign up for the product, right? As opposed to implement Facebook authentication, right? Give them the problem to solve and then let them figure out how best to solve that. Now, what you're doing in that situation is you're opening up a can of worms. It's messy when you do that, right? The binary aspect of managing that type of process goes away, right? If you're asking somebody to increase signups, let's say you're asking them to increase it by 25%, and they increase it by 14%. Did they fail? Did they succeed? It's less clear, and so it becomes more difficult to manage for that. And so as you're setting these objectives, get granular, get specific. We want you to increase repeat traffic to the website by 18% month over month, right? We want people to follow at least 5 people in their first month of usage of the product. Right? We'd like to sell this much product to this particular target audience over the next year, something that people can measure and attribute their work to. Let me give you an example of that. Again, case study from the ladders. I was on a team there that was tasked with moving a metric called job seeker response rate. Every time an employer communicated through our system to a job seeker, we could measure that. And we could measure how many times a job seeker responded. When we joined this project, that number was 14%. You've got 2 people playing in an ecosystem, paying money to be there, and connecting only 14% of the time, which was terrible. And so we took a cross-functional team of designers, engineers, and product managers, and we put them to work. And we started brainstorming ideas, and we ran experiments, and we tested it. And the measure of success for us was not which features we launched, but where that number was. And after 3 months, we got to 38%. And we got back up in front of the company, and we said, look, you tasked us with moving that number from 14% to 75%. We've worked for 3 months. We are now at 38. What do you want to do? Here's what, if you were to fund us for another 3 months, here's what we would do. What do you want to do? Now the company can make an evidence-based decision, a decision based in reality that says, we've seen the work, we've seen the progress, we know what we'll do next, should we fund this further? And the company said, yes, you can work again for another 3 months. And so we did it again. We worked and we brainstormed and we launched features. And at the end of 6 months, we were at 68%. Not 75, 68. And the company said, that's good enough. You've come close enough, you can move on to another project. Now, what was interesting is that the features that we launched to move that number were never prescribed. No one ever came to that team and said, build a new mailbox, or build an alert feature, or a blinking red nag on their homepage. Right? We did whatever worked based on that objective measure of success. And as we ran these experiments, we were able to make our decisions based on these objective observations. Should we go left? Should we go right? Should we go straight? And keep doing more of this. And as you do that, as you collect objective observations, you get to a point where you have enough insight to make a decision. And when you get to that point, you have 3 options. Okay? If the data says that this is a bad idea, kill that idea. Don't spend any more time working on a bad idea. If the insight from the marketplace comes back, the feedback from that continuous learning cycle says, this is not worth pursuing, kill that idea quickly. Don't spend any more time on it. Okay? Sometimes you'll get some feedback that says, this is a good idea, but we're not moving forward at the pace that we'd like to move forward in. That's when you pivot. You maintain your strategy, and you change your tactics. And you see if you can move the number forward even faster. You'll get to a point where you find the right idea. It works, and the metrics are moving in a nice direction. That's when you double down. That's when you scale. That's when you start to deliver more and more in this particular direction. Once you have figured out what actually solves the problem, that's when you expand the team and the delivery of the process. Now look, there are easy parts to this, and there are hard parts to this. Here are the easy parts. Measuring. As long as you've got the software in place, right? As long as you're building it into your products, that's easy. Analytics, usage, metrics, etc. Talking to customers, it's easy. You just have to do it. Right? Qualitative insight into why customers are doing the things that we're measuring. That's also relatively easy. Reflecting, pausing with your team, and having a discussion to understand the numbers, the qualitative insight, and to discuss what you could potentially do to react to that new information. This is all easy. Right? You could be doing this tomorrow at work or Monday. Right? Here's the hard part. The hard part is changing course. This is where most companies stumble. This is where most teams stumble. Right? You've been working on something for 6 months, but the feedback is coming back and says, you know what, we're going down the wrong path. But we've worked on it for 6 months. Right? Let's just keep going. We have 6 more months to go. Right? Why would you ship something that's not going to work? The information, the continuous learning cycle is telling you that this is not going to work, even though you've put 6 months into it. The hard part is changing course. That's where organizational discipline comes in. That's where team maturity comes in, to not waste any more time going down the wrong path. Let me show you. This is how, again, Guilt Group, this is how they do it. They define 2 types of KPIs. KPIs are key performance indicators. They're metrics. They're measures. They have a strategic KPI, company-level KPIs. So think of those things as customer satisfaction, revenue, sales, profit, that type of thing. And then they have tactical KPIs, smaller, granular metrics that would indicate, they're leading indicators that you're going to move the strategic KPIs. The teams work at the tactical KPI level. And when they hit those, they stop measuring that and they move on to the next thing. They focus on those as their measures of success and how to indicate that they're headed in the right direction. And that's how we task the team, using those objectives to guide them in the right direction. The last thing I want to talk about is how should the team work? What process makes sense? Should it be agile or lean or waterfall or agile fall or Kanban or Scrumban or Scrumfall or lean fall, all of those crazy things. So let's talk about anti-patterns one last time, really quick. More pictures from the circus because I have them and I wanted to use them. No cross-functional collaboration is an anti-pattern of teams. First of all, these are pictures from the circus, so just to tell you, these are the elephant people, obviously. These were 3 women who walked on giant white balls up ramps. That's what they did. And that's Charlie. He served our meals 3 times a day if you were brave enough to eat at Charlie's canteen. There was no cross-functional collaboration whatsoever in the circus, right? Even the clowns had infighting. They hated each other, the clowns, right? But can you imagine, you've got the human, we had tigers in the circus, tigers, right? Can you imagine the human cannonball, he's already flying across the tent anyway. If there were some tigers here that he flew over, right? The explosive nature of the act goes up exponentially, but they never, ever collaborated, right? This is where the magic happens. Cross-functional collaboration between designers, engineers, and product managers at the very least, that's where great ideas are born. Most of us are not design geniuses, right? Most of us are not Steve Jobs. Cross-functional collaboration drives these great ideas. The next anti-pattern that I see is this. I see a fixation on job titles. People focus so much on what it says on your business card, right? You're a designer. There's no way you could write code, right? You're an engineer. There's no way you can design, right? And we don't let people contribute in all the different ways that they can. And that's really where the value comes in. To drive the point home, I'm going to share with you a really quick story about this guy. Now, if you were in my workshop, don't give it away, okay? Because I used the slide in my workshop. Does anybody know who this is who wasn't in my workshop? Any guesses? It's not me. Always a good guess. I showed you what I look like with long hair. Okay, let me give it away. This is who this is. This guy's name is Skunk Baxter. Jeff Skunk Baxter. Jeff Baxter, or Skunk, as he's known, he was a founding member of Steely Dan, and he was in the Doobie Brothers for 40 years. He's a legendary American rock and roll guitarist. Okay? Anybody want to take a guess what he does today, mostly? UX designer? No, I'm kidding. Okay. What is it? No, here. This is what he does today. I'll let you read it for a second. It's on Wikipedia, so it has to be true, right? He's a defense consultant to the US government on missile defense. Okay. Now, if Skunk gave you his business card or his CV and it said legendary rock and roll guitarist, would you let him anywhere near a conversation about missile defense? Right? The answer is hopefully no, right? But here's the thing. Skunk knows a ton about missile defense because it is his secondary competency. It's his passion, it's his love. Outside of playing guitar, this is the second thing that he loves most in life. And so he happens to know a lot, and he can participate intelligently and contribute to a conversation on missile defense. Your colleagues can do the same. Your colleagues can do more than just the thing that it says on their business cards. Let them contribute as much as you can, especially during the concepting phases of your project. That's where the magic happens in the cross-functional collaboration. Another anti-pattern is the fear of failure, right? Your ass is on the line. You like it? Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. It's my favorite slide, too. If you work in a culture that makes failure a punishable offense, no one will ever take any risks. No one will run these experiments. You can't build a culture of learning if people are afraid to fail, right? If you get fired if you fail, then nobody will try anything, right? But we never consider the scope of the fail. Think of those Amazon experiments, 11.6 seconds. If they get it wrong, they roll it back. How many people saw it? You know, a tiny bit. It goes out to a tiny fraction of the population, and it's a tiny change. It's a word change. It's a pixel change. It's a button movement. It's not the entire checkout process or the product page. And every time we try something, we learn something, and we shouldn't fear for the repercussions of getting those ideas wrong. Another anti-pattern is arbitrary deadlines, right? You got to get it done by this date. You guys know who this is? It's Paulie. Paulie, you know, doesn't matter what happened to your business. Paulie had a deadline and you had to pay him. Fuck you, pay me, essentially. his mantra, right? Deadlines. Deadlines are motivational techniques, 99% of the time. There's no other reason for them except in rare situations, right? Let's not motivate people by deadlines. Let's let them build the best projects that they can. Typically what happens when you give people deadlines is that you also give them fixed scope. And when you fix scope and you fix time, one of three things typically happens in my experience with software projects. First is you move the deadline. The second is that you reduce scope. Or the third is that we spend the last 3 weeks of the project in crunch mode. Crunch mode is what we call it, where you work 80 hours a week to get it done, and then you quit and you go work somewhere else. Right? Let people use the objectives as clear measures of success. Right? Let's move away from this culture of CYA. Right? Cover your ass. Don't build this culture where people are afraid to do anything in case they get it wrong. Right? So the question becomes then, how does a culture of learning change the way a team works? How should the team actually work? First and foremost, take smaller risks. You could argue this is the first experiment for the GoPro camera. I don't know that that's the case, right? That is, but they've done pretty well if that was the case, right? And then we've ended up with this kind of thing now where people just kind of hold it on a stick and take all the fun out of it, right? Take smaller risks, right? I was running in Los Angeles this summer, and I used this app called Map My Run. And I was running on Venice Beach, and you get out to Venice Pier, and Venice Pier goes about a half mile into the ocean, and the sun was rising, and I get to the end of the pier, and the surfers are out, and the palm trees are swaying, and the adrenaline is flowing. I feel very inspired. I pause the tracking of the run, and I get this screen right here. And it says, hey, would you like to take photos? And I said, yes. That's exactly what I want to do right now, because it was beautiful, and I was inspired. And I said, go. And it says, terrific, pay us $30. And you can take photos. I'm not going to pay you $30. Certainly not now at that point. So the end of this is perhaps not the best approach, right? But here's the thing. All the things that they're selling here never have to exist. You don't have to build this. The only thing you have to build is this, and measure how many times people say, yes, I want this, or no, I don't, before you actually invest in building something more than that, right? This is cheap. That's a small risk. That's a big risk. GE is doing this now. They're taking the ideas of lean startup and they're building it into a methodology called FastWorks inside, and they're building refrigerators this way. And they're taking industrial engineers and suppliers and manufacturers and designers, and they're putting them in a room together, and they're launching a refrigerator that they iterated on 10 times in just over a year. This is something that would take them 5 years to normally do, and they're seeing customer feedback, and they're launching version 10 of this refrigerator in January of 2015, and they started in the middle of 2013. So 10 versions of a refrigerator, which is something they've never done before to find the right product, taking smaller risks. Now what we do is we build this continuous learning practice, and as we take these risks and understand where to go, what we're doing is we're putting a brain on the Agile process. My friend Bill Scott, who works at PayPal, talks about Agile not having a brain. Because it's come up through software engineering, we've built really great Agile software engineering teams. And those teams are incentivized for the efficient delivery of high-quality code, but not necessarily for delivering the right thing. But by building this experiment layer on top of that, we can give the Agile process a brain about where to go, what to build, and equally as importantly, what to design and how to design it and where to work harder on it. This is a picture of my favorite feature at my gym. So I work out, when I'm home, I work out at this gym, and this is my favorite feature. It's called the cardio theater. Essentially, it is a movie theater that has cardio machines in it. You can run on the treadmill and watch a movie on the big screen. I love this, okay? The guy comes every morning at 4:30 in the morning to open the gym. He turns the lights on, he pushes play on the movie, he hears sound, he sees the picture, and he says, terrific, works as designed, right? I come in at 5:30 with a bunch of other people, and as soon as you get more than one person running on a treadmill in here, you can't hear the movie anymore, right? It's unusable, and it's undesirable. So just because it works as designed is no longer good enough. That's why we need to have that qualitative feedback loop built into the quantitative feedback loop. to understand where we should spend our time designing as we work in that sprint structure. And we understand that by looking for metrics through clear definitions of success, right? We measure behavior. We do that by allowing our colleagues to do everything that they can to make the product and the project better, regardless of what it says on their job title. And then most importantly, we let teams self-organize. We let them decide how to best structure their process. You can give them some starting principles, right? Work in a short cycle. Take 2 weeks. At the end of 2 weeks, pause to reflect about what happened over the last couple weeks. Start there and see how it goes. But don't try to force methodologies on people that they're either not ready for or that don't actually help them do their jobs better. Jeff Nicholson, who invented the Post-it note, said that 3M tried to put Six Sigma, which is a process that's designed to improve the efficiency of manufacturing, onto his team when they didn't even know if it was a good idea yet, if anybody even wanted it. Right? Don't force processes on teams that they don't need. Let them self-organize. Now look, at the end of the day, everything that I've told you today is difficult. It's culture change, it's process change, right? Why should you do it? It's a lot of hard work. 3 reasons. First and foremost, you're going to make your customers happy by building things that they can actually use, that they want to use, and that solve real problems for them. Okay? You're going to reduce waste by building more successful products. Building things that customers want means that you're building successful products, which means you're not wasting your time on projects that don't ship, or that don't succeed, or that fail on a massive scale. And then finally, you're going to increase employee morale. So your morale, your colleagues, the people that you work with will get a clear sense of what they're doing at the company, what their goal is, what the mission is, and what success looks like. And that drives great teamwork, collaboration, good colleagues coming in, and that is a recipe for success. At the end of the day, it comes down to this. You have to transform your culture and your teams from a culture of delivery to a culture of learning. Thanks a lot.